Thanks, Dr. Koch. That was always good to get that foundation and insight and sort of differentiation between an old, ancient view of medicine and health. Naturopathic medicine also has a view of health as far as a differentiation from allopathic medicine, in that we like to look at underlying cause. And so many of our patients deal with anxiety and depression. They often go hand in hand. And I guess one of the things that led me to be a naturopath and to even get my master's degree in psychology was my own struggle with anxiety and depression. And, you know, a lot of it didn't make sense to me. I had a good life, but I always struggled with that mood component. And so one of the things I've learned is that our mood is almost 40% wired in, meaning we inherit it, sort of a state. And so about 40% of that is genetic, but then the good news is 60% of it we can manipulate or we can change, we have an impact on. So environment, nutrition, development of our nervous system and our adrenal glands, the unconscious have a lot to play with both these conditions, anxiety and depression. And what exactly is anxiety? A lot of times I ask patients who say they have anxiety, what does that actually mean? Is your mind busy? Does your body feel tense? What exactly does that mean? The kind of feelings that come up are people are worried, they're sad, they're tired or fatigued, they're shy, they can be unfocused, they can have addictions, they can be angry or have anger, and all of that can imply, or in their mind, feel like anxiety or depression. So I guess the evolution of understanding our feelings is something that I have to teach a lot of patients and something that I had to learn myself. And feelings and how they work, you know, feelings are designed to give us information, give us a response to the doctor, give us a response about our boss, the kind of work we're doing. And those feelings then are really sort of our guidance system. That seems valuable to me. No, I really don't want that. So this idea about tuning into our feelings and understanding our feelings, even being able to identify our feelings, is really important. If we can do that, then we can make a choice, we can make a decision, we can have a response. The difficult part for a lot of people, including myself, I'm still learning, is to have a vocabulary to describe that. Most people will say they feel good, or I don't feel very good.
Or bad.
How
Good.
does that feel? Yeah, good or bad. That's not a very comprehensive way of identifying feelings, but it's very common. So we didn't learn to have language. So if you can't have the feeling identified, express it, it actually can become internalized and become sort of a feeling state. So the value of therapy or writing or talking to a good friend, talking to your doctor, is that you can start expressing the feeling, and then it's available to be released. You can go on. But if we don't do that, especially at foundational points in our life or with big experiences, those emotions get internalized and they become a state that we just sort of live with and hang on to. And I think about this as it becomes habituated in the unconscious to carry this state. So from my childhood, I sort of carried a state of being anxious or worried. I had a mother who was a worrier. There was stress going on, and a lot of people live in these kind of environments. The interesting thing, though, is that before the 0 to 7, we're in sort of an altered state in our brain. We call it a theta brain state, and that is a very suggestible state in the unconscious mind. That means things that are said to us, feelings we pick up around us, become internalized as true and get downloaded sort of into the unconscious mind as this is the way it is. Now, of course, when you're a kid, you don't go to your mom and say, you know, Mom, I'm unfocused today. Something's distracting me. I feel vulnerable. Little kids don't have those kind of words usually to describe those feeling states, but they are internalizing them. And that again becomes this sort of foundation in the unconscious from which they perceive life and then respond to life. these feeling states, everybody has them, often serve us very well. So I learned to be very much an overachiever, tried to follow all the rules, and be perfect really to fit in and to receive the kind of attention I needed to feel loved. And those feelings of being unworthy or unsafe sort of drove that development and that type of behavior. So some of that is good. I'm really successful. I'm a doctor. I got a lot of education. A lot of people like me because I try really hard to be liked. But, at some point, those driven behaviors, even if they help you be successful, can turn into neurotic tendencies. You can become OCD. You can develop addictions to kind of buffer some of that pressure that the unconscious drives. Whenever you're in a situation and you react automatically, especially when it might be in a negative way or a positive way, but I often think of the negative way as like, a little conflict with my husband. When you react and can't help yourself from saying something, it's coming from the unconscious. It's coming from a belief system the unconscious is holding on to and wants to perceive as true. So a common one for me was that I was unsupported. So my first husband, I married a really good man, felt very secure, had a lot of love, but every time he wouldn't talk to me, I felt unloved. And, I'd start a big fight about it, if you would have said this, blah, blah, blah. Whenever I got possessed or, taken over, I couldn't help but feel justified. That's a sign that the unconscious was acting out of belief. And so I did years of sort of Jungian therapy to try to understand these emotions and where they were coming from, and it actually healed a lot. I finally let go of that feeling. Conflict was much less. I felt more secure and I was happier. So that is one way to sort of get in touch with what the unconscious is trying to play out, but it takes some self-awareness. Let's see. So one more thing about the unconscious is when you have these feelings and belief states, you tend to look for them to be true. So you actually see life through that mirror, through that lens, so to speak, and you actually attract people and situations that make it true. So if you have the feeling that you're unsupported, you will find yourself doing way too much and people not offering to help you because that's not congruent with your belief system that you're unsupported. If you can start having some awareness about what your feelings are and start challenging those feelings and most of all challenging the thoughts that precede the feeling, then you have a way of starting to unravel and actually choose a different way of being in the world. So one of the things I did a long time ago to start asking myself that question and challenging my response to things is when I was anxious or afraid or my feelings were hurt, I'd ask, what am I afraid of? Because I read this book called Love is Letting Go of Fear, and it basically said you can live in love or you can live in fear. And most feelings actually come from that sort of negative feelings, especially anxiety and depression, come from this state of fear. So if my feelings get hurt, I would ask myself, what am I afraid of? He doesn't really love me. I'm not going to do well enough. Somebody's going to find out I really don't know what I'm talking about. There's this fear. And then if you question what those thoughts are, a lot of them aren't true, especially as you're an adult. It wasn't true for me. I had a husband who loved me. I had office staff that loved me, but the feelings that were being triggered were from thoughts that actually weren't accurate anymore. So when we have these unconscious beliefs, they reside in our old reptilian brain, and that's the brain that developed through this survival mechanism of fight or flight. And when we react to life, usually it's coming from those habituated tendencies that we've learned or emotional states. To be intentional means that you come from the prefrontal cortex, which is the area of our brain where we have imagination and we can create something new. So you can only be in one brain or the other, the old brain or the prefrontal cortex. So a lot of times when we're going to react and say something, we know that's going to get us in trouble. If you can have the thought, not react, and look for a second thought, that in itself can interrupt this flow of automatic reaction that reinforce really an old neuronal pathway in the brain, and we can create a new one. It takes practice, it takes intention, it takes training, but whatever we practice we can get good at, and that is one way to start changing some of these patterns. Staying in the present moment, being aware of what we're feeling, having some attention to the thought that's driving the feeling, is a way of starting to change some of those patterns. So, let's say I can do that twice a day. Once you've done it, once you've tried to do it, it gets easier and easier and easier. And it's not so much that, we have to be perfect at it, but if you want to change a pattern, if I want to be less anxious at work or kinder to my daughter, it's just having the intention that I'm going to change this pattern and look at really what that feeling and thought are underneath that are driving my sort of negative behaviors and my anxiety or my depression. I often tell people when you practice these things to observe yourself, be curious. How much changes? Do people respond to you a little different if you put out there, for example, I had a little altercation with my husband. Everybody knows he's a nice guy. And so nice. I wrote a little note to myself, Gary forgives me and I move on. And sure enough, he forgave me. I couldn't believe it. But it was better than me holding on to the grudge, reinforcing it in my own mind why I was right. It just, it allowed me to kind of let go and then just be kind of a little curious about how much that would change. It definitely changed my mood. It was easier for me to let go because somehow I stepped out of that old unconscious groove and got into a new one. So, I hope that's a little helpful for you to understand. It gives you some tools or maybe a little information to start thinking about your behaviors, becoming self-aware. All the disciplines like yoga, psychotherapy, even the arts, writing, music, dance, do give you some access to your emotion. Just starting to come up with the vocabulary about what these feelings are in a differentiated, more colorful way gives you information that you can start tapping into your own inner self and understanding and having compassion, patience, and expectation that you can change. You can find happiness. You can find a vitality you haven't had before. I think the next place we'll go is have Dr. Koch talk a little bit about this subtlety in the Chinese medicine system that starts perceiving these imbalances, because one thing we know is our biochemistry is responding to our unconscious all the time. I think one of the reasons I emphasize the unconscious in my work is if we work with biochemistry, which will be in a next lecture, what's driving that? Again, it's our thoughts, conscious and unconscious. So if we can manipulate the body, the energy in these meridian systems in the body, then it's much more likely you'll have success in working with the emotions and the feelings that are also contributing to this. We are really a body, mind, and spirit, and how it interplays in both of our medicines is so incredible. It gives us so many opportunities.
Yeah, so emotions in Chinese medicine are huge. They're a big factor, one of the primary factors in the beginning of a disease process. So I'm really glad that you really focused on that and about how to transform it and how to change it. In acupuncture, and there's a couple meridians that are really involved with emotions. Each organ system, each meridian has an emotion associated with it. But like you were saying, there's a lot that we've just sort of inherited, and that's in Chinese medicine as well. And that's really in the kidney system. And if that system gets deficient, we will start seeing a real imbalance in the system, and it may present as anxiety. And so you really want to be mindful about what you're feeling externally and internally. So the emotion may actually be coming from an internal organ system, but it also can be from externally, from what you're perceiving or what you're experiencing in your environment. So both can be an assault to the system. And it's so important if you get stuck in emotion or you're feeling something constantly all the time, to start doing some of the therapies that you were suggesting. You know, for me personally, as I've gotten older, I've gotten a little bit better at detecting when I'm getting stuck or not really feeling the full range of emotions. You know, at that point, I know I need to, you know, either see a therapist or get acupuncture, kind of move the meridian, the energy in the system to help myself process it and digest the emotion. You know, or do some of the different therapies like meditation or Qigong or Tai Chi or emotional freedom technique. And you know, learn a lot of the different types of ways that we can really process the emotion and move it through the body, because that is the primary sort of like the first assault in the disease process. And I think lots of times in Western medicine, they kind of leave that out. And I think that's kind of the beauty of our medicine, is that we really recognize how that is a big, you know, has a big impact on our health. You know, we experience it ourselves, we see it in our patients as well. But so there's this kidney heart meridian disconnect, the yin and yang, the balance between the kidney and the heart, start in a way they stop communicating to one another properly. And so you start seeing a lot of energy rise upwards. So you'll see a lot of that anxiety, you know, people feel right here. You know,
chest breathing,
right, yeah, shallow,
right,
shallow breathing. All of a sudden, you don't really feel in your body anymore. You feel really lightheaded. You lose that sense of feeling grounded, and so, you know, a lot of therapies that we're talking about, and that, you know, you were kind of touching upon, are things to keep you mindful and keep you in your body, so that you don't lose that disconnect, and that you start to sort of regenerate the chi in your body properly, the flow, the upward and downward flow, which is really critical. So anxiety is sort of this upward flow of imbalance. And depression, it can be more of a downward, but it has different qualities to it as well. And in further, you know, videos we'll discuss it. There's a lot. I think you know, we can discuss different treatments, different ideas, different philosophies, you know, maybe some of the herbal medicine, you know, some really practical techniques that you can just do, you know, at home.
And I really like to talk about the biochemistry of the nervous system. I'd like to talk about the biochemistry of the adrenal system, which is our fight or flight response. So I think that is a good place for us to probably wrap up this discussion, and hope that you tune into those further videos that we'll do and presentations. I think you'll find information you can understand and actually apply, as well as encourage you to work with practitioners and who have the skill and training to figure this out, because we committed a lot of life to this training. And we've both got, like, you know, nearly 20 years apiece of practicing. And I think with that knowledge, you know, we can help you get there faster. So we really appreciate you tuning in today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hope you continue to follow us. You can look at some links following the video that'll come along with the video here, and from Natural Health Clinic in Des Moines.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to talk today.
Yeah, our pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.